and then we just got knocked off. Let's see if it resumes here. I think it will. Sorry, Charles, what were we speaking about there?
We were speaking about the hot pot.
Right, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, but so
Yeah, it's
we were
back.
speaking about Dershowitz in the interview and how many you speak about lowering the age of consent, how he was arguing for that, and how odd that was. I just think when you get to be somebody like him, or Bill Clinton, or Larry Summers, or these very famous, or Bill Gates, typically you have people around you who are advising you whether you should or should not meet with people. Your lawyers, your accountants, your friends. And the last thing you would do is make the mistake of spending time, any time, particularly time on a remote island with Jeffrey Epstein.
Is that a bad idea?
Yeah, very. And then when you start seeing people lying about it, and I'm not saying necessarily Dershowitz is lying about it, but Gates for certain lied about it. Gates said, oh, I'd never met him, I never spent any time with him. And then recently we've seen Jim Stewart's book, Deep State, in which multiple meetings all over the place, in Seattle, in New York, on the island. And you know, why is Bill Gates, I mean, people I know who have fancy aircraft, the last thing they want to do is go in somebody else's aircraft. It's a whole thing.
Particularly a 50-year-old one.
Yeah, it's a whole thing of like, it's my plane, I got my captain, I got my engineers, right. I got this and that on my routine.
They wouldn't even let Bill Gates on somebody else's aircraft because he as a person is worth so much money to their organization. They want full control over everybody who's flying him around, right?
Well, but he flew on Epstein's plane.
But in general, I mean,
right.
Isn't that true? They don't want...
I would guess. It's dangerous for him. It's so you do things like that.
This might be Angel Urena's block. I seem to remember seeing this on Google Earth. We won't bother him today, but
106.
I think that might be his street.
Could be. Let's just see if we got the light or not.
I don't think we do.
We could go though. If we're quick.
This Nissan Rogue is going to try to hit us. So yeah, it's strange that Bill Gates would be on that jet. In our previous conversation outside the court, Dershowitz admitted that he had been to the island. I can't recall if he said if he was on the jet or not.
Well, so the trick there is that the jet doesn't land on the island.
Right.
The jet lands at St. Thomas or near St. Thomas, and then you take either a helicopter or a boat to get to the island. So I could say categorically, we don't know what we need to know about Epstein yet. We don't even know 10% of what we need to know. And
how do you like this guy?
He's rocking it. He's leaning in.
Yep.
But this area, you can see it has it's evocative of portions of Paris. It's obviously not as nice as Paris, but it could be much nicer than it is if people cleaned it up and invested money in it, right? I mean, the buildings aren't overpowering, a lot of light coming in.
Yeah.
You could imagine changing the ordinance to allow restaurants outside.
Yeah, where does Harlem begin, Charles?
It's kind of a state of mind question. Geographically,
isn't there a street above which?
1/10, some people would say.
Okay, so, I mean, isn't this the neighborhood that the Clintons basically selected to put their office in? And
125th they were up to. This
but
guy.
Harlem, so if it starts at 110th and they go to 125th,
Well,
they're infusing something into the neighborhood.
Yeah, it really depends whether you're east or west, but I think around 110th Street, there was a movie back in the day, I think in the 70s or 80s, called Across 110th Street. The theory being that at 110th, you start getting decisively into Harlem. But now we're just on the edge of Yuppieville. We're not too far down this way.
Caution, face mask required to eat ice cream.
That's a conundrum, right? Here's your ice cream, now try to eat it through the face mask.
Permeate the face mask with it.
Yeah. Is this Jimmy Kimmel making some money on the weekends?
Jimmy's Kitchen? I don't know about that. Food truck. I'm not a big food truck eater.
Actually,
That
sometimes
place is doing cash only.
Well, because they just don't want to report any of the income.
maybe he just can't get a credit card machine in the truck, or. But I mean, that's what I mean. It's like all these virus precautions are so non-science based.
So maybe we should. Have we exhausted the Dershowitz analysis, or do you want to?
Up to you.
It's up to you. If you have other things we should talk about.
I mean, I think he was basically, he got irritated with the questions, and I think he has an agenda. That became clear to me. I mean, obviously a lot of people knew that before, but it seems to me there are these lawyers who play a very important role for the DA. It's unclear if they themselves are, agents of anything, but they just are lawyers who are skilled at handling the types of things that these guys need handled.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, that case is moving along. Giuffre, I think, is pressing ahead. Prince Andrew has been off. I guess he's technically still a prince, but he's out of the limelight. He's been awfully quiet. And
the other thing is that Dershowitz denied the existence of videos. I asked him, isn't it, because I wanted to get into the whole Harvard professors seemingly all being under the Bill Gates umbrella, Bill Gates being friends with Epstein. How do we know that Bill Gates wasn't using Epstein to compromise people with, blackmail material like videos of them involved in ill things, and then getting these scientists to do things that they otherwise might not do? He shut down that entire line of questioning, and I think it's a valid line. He said Acosta lied, that Epstein had nothing to do with intelligence. It just seems weird that he would talk about any of that at all, and that his answers seem to be not truthful based on what's in the public domain.
well, on the Harvard thing, you bring up an excellent point as usual, that Harvard, I think, became corrupted probably before Larry Summers, but at some point in the 80s or 90s. And there's new reporting out now, not only that Epstein was engaged in suspicious activities at Harvard, under young assistants, mincing in and out of an office, getting a fellowship when he really had no academic credentials of any kind, claiming that he gave 30 million, when in reality, the math so far we see is about 7. And they haven't gone down the alley of asking how much money was given to Harvard by Les Wexner and his family.
I forgot to tell you, there was a Chinese professor at the University of Arkansas who just got arrested.
Right, and also now another one at Case Western just arrested. So
there seems to be a real, kind of like coalition of college professors who are involved in transferring some of the most advanced technologies from experimental university stage to, some group that's perhaps using biowarfare.
Well, this is as a mutual friend of ours just said to me this morning, it's called the corruption of science. In order to advance many scientific discoveries, you need to secure grants. To secure grants, you need to curry favor with the Faucis of this world, maybe the Birxes of this world, who seem to share a common left-leaning or maybe globalist, unregulated globalist perspective. So you have the thirst for grant money. You have the natural thirst to make money. A lot of these scientists think they're so much smarter than everybody else, and yet they're not Bill Gates, they're not billionaires. So they want to in on venture capital deals and other deals like that. Then you have the university wanting the prestige of leading global fights against noteworthy diseases and causes. So it all came together, I think, at Harvard, and there wasn't enough control, particularly in the Larry Summers period, when Epstein got to park his sorry face at Harvard, when this other guy, Weiss, W-Y-S-S,
right,
managed to give a lot of money and then park.
Yeah, I didn't even get into that with Dershowitz. That Weiss guy is very questionable. What's that right there, Charles?
I don't know.
That looks pretty.
I think it's just a church.
And interesting.
It's an Episcopalian church.
Huh.
I can see that because of the flag.
Oh yeah. Good spot. Harvard.
So yeah, we have this. The biggest, people talk about inflation and deflation. The biggest inflation that we see is in the most difficult areas. So you want to go from being a smart enthusiastic young person into being credentialed, whatever, you name it, doctor, investment banker, lawyer, you want to get into the Ivy League schools or the top schools. And so those schools figure that out. And they figured out that under unregulated globalism, you could get a lot more applicants for the same number of spots. And many of those applicants were used to the idea of buying their way in, not to say Americans aren't used to the idea of buying their way in. So Harvard, I don't think, can say at this day and age that it really needs money. I mean, it has an endowment of $40 billion.
That's amazing.
And its professional schools mint money, right? It's the undergraduate schools, it's the social sciences, the humanities. Those schools arguably need money, but the professional schools do not. I mean, I related the last Capital Fund for Harvard Business School drive. I went to the opening, at which, when they're launching the capital campaign, it was $1 billion campaign, and they said, we're announcing a campaign, it'll be an X-year effort, and we want to let you know that we've already raised $800 million.
Wow.
And they already had billions, so.
Dirty looks from everybody, Charles.
I don't
We're
care.
not wearing masks.
Yeah, we're journalists. So.
But it just bodes not well for the future of, like what Dershowitz was saying. This is a democracy, and it doesn't have anything to do with science or medicine. It has to do with getting everybody to vote that you need to be vaccinated.
Did you say democracy or kleptocracy? I'm trying to remember which.
He said democracy, but I think most of what he said was questionable at best. He also seems to think that if, whatever science says, if people vote that you need a vaccine, then that's a vaccine that you need. And he also said that if you want to, he very quickly made it me versus him,
right.
That he would argue against my views at the Supreme Court, and that if you want to defy Fauci, you could flout the law, which suggests if Fauci's word is the law.
Yeah, that I thought was a bit over the top.
It's absurd.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know how much time we have, but I think maybe we should get into a little bit Emmett Sullivan and the Flynn case.
Let's talk about that.
Because that's really, now, Sidney Powell, who we've had on the show, and you've met her, and has a long career fighting injustice. In her book,
go to the other side of the street. It's still too hot.
Okay. Well, we'll have to cross this way first, and then. She has a long career fighting injustice. Indeed, she represented Ted Stevens, who was denied exculpatory information in a trial argued in front of Emmett Sullivan, in which Emmett Sullivan, the old Emmett Sullivan, hopefully the real Emmett Sullivan, took the prosecution to task for denying exculpatory information.
He's famous for that.
Right. Well, in this recent developments in the Flynn case, I mean, it's almost as if they're in cricket. The pitcher, there's a certain type of pitch where the ball goes like that. It's called, I think, a googly. It's almost as if they're throwing a googly here. I mean, how can you have the prosecution say, you know what, on second thought, we've wasted the court's time, we've wasted a lot of money as far as the defendant. We should probably cross the defendant.
But now we're going to bring in some other judge to...
No, the first step is the prosecution says, there's no case here, we're not going to try the case, sorry. And the correct decision at that point would have been promptly to say...
pack up the tents and go home.
Right, but instead of doing that, not only did they, at first, say we're going to invite amicus curiae briefs. Let's quickly go across that. And not only to start with that, then get a letter from 1900, the spontaneous letter from 1900 former prosecutors. That's about as spontaneous as the Big Dig tunnel in Boston.
Who's Peter Norton, Charles?
I don't know.
Peter Norton Symphony? Anyway, okay, sorry.
So spontaneously these requests, the letter comes, the judge then says, yeah, sure, I want these briefs. And then he says, I'm going to appoint a new former judge to decide whether Flynn should be convicted of perjury, which he was never charged with in the first case.
Well, I think because he's saying that he told Emmett Sullivan this stuff under oath, and now he's going back on it. That's the perjury.
Well, and then to say after that Covington and Burling, a notoriously conflicted, in this case, law firm, given that Eric Holder is an important partner there now, ought to be brought back into the courtroom to weigh in on what should happen next. I mean, this is, what do we move from the United States of America to, I don't know, pick a corrupt place.
Mao's China.
Right.
Or it's also interesting to believe, what is this judge's name who he's bringing in?
I forget.
I forget his name, but he was one of the 93 that were initially appointed by Bill Clinton after he fired all the U.S. attorneys, which had never been done before. People, including Dershowitz, kind of smile tongue-in-cheek now, saying, oh, well, that's become commonplace.
Yeah, only because Bill Clinton
invented it. It was unheard of before that.
Right. So I think, you know, that the developments in that case, for certain, it's either going to be stopped. I think it's Dershowitz who mentioned you can secure, Sydney could get a writ of prohibition, maybe to stop the case, or it'll be decided against Flynn and then immediately appealed, in which event, even if they lose at the appeal court, they will win at the Supreme Court. And all this is doing is just subjecting Flynn to more agony, more expense.
More cost, right. Well, I think we need to kind of acknowledge Larry Klayman for calling this basically from the word go. He said that Sidney Powell would upset Emmett Sullivan by going on Fox News and rubbing this in his face, and that it wasn't going to go well.
Well, that's
Perhaps
fine.
That's what we're seeing.
Fine. I mean, just the bright line letter of the law seems to me, you step back and you say, what is a judge? You know, a judge is supposed to...
Look at this.
Yeah.
Booze on the street. That's a new form of business in New York
You get
City.
a quarantini. The last thing I wanted.
Businesses,
4 o'clock.
whoops, it's looking at us, sorry. This is the quarantinis. But businesses need to do what they can to stay in business. There's notably nobody in there.
Well, very few people on a Sunday drink hard liquor at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 4:30, maybe I got that wrong.
Well, certainly I'm not interested in doing that, but I think there's a lot of people who do. Why is it not? There we go. It's not cooperating, Charles. There we go.
So, so on Sullivan, I think we're going to shortly find out that a ton of bricks are going to be dropped on him, and that this will be turned into an election issue.
I agree.
That for once, I mean, Clarence Thomas has been on record stating that one of the most important objectives for any president should be to change the way in which judges are allowed to rule. In other words, Trump will say something, executive order, and it'll be challenged by this judge in this jurisdiction, overturned, then challenge another one. You should have, for a national process, you should have, you know, one national challenge, one hearing, and then it's settled. You shouldn't have to go for every judge in the country to try to get something settled.
I also don't like the fact that these federal judges, sorry?
Wear masks.
Go,
What would you say about that guy, Charles?
idiot.
Tell him to lose weight. That'll help the public health as well. There's something more important than that guy that I was going to talk about.
Yeah, well, so we were saying that the Sullivan, the way...
The lifetime appointments of federal judges is another problem.
Right. So that's a big development. Another big development is the whole Linick, the Inspector General of the State Department being fired. They're trying to turn that into a litany of, you know, Trump can't be trusted because he's getting rid of Inspectors General right and left. Let's think about this Linick. In the first instance, for the State Department, in the final Bush years, there was no Inspector General. That's suspicious to me, right?
Right.
In all of Hillary's time as Secretary of State, there was no Inspector General at the State Department. And I should have said to that guy, listen, Fat.
Exactly.
but there was no inspector general. And then they appoint this Linux guy.
There was the first iteration of our sound problem. Let's see.
So they appointed, under Kerry, they appointed an inspector general, this Linux guy, sometime in 2013. Now, the first question I have about all that is the same people who are belly aching about Trump firing this Linux, this inspector general, why weren't they raising a big ruckus during the 4 long years where Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State about how come there was no inspector general at the State Department? Why didn't they raise a ruckus about the fact that USAID, which used to be separate, was turned into a situation where it reported directly to Hillary Clinton, while Bill Clinton was engaged with his Clinton Foundation in an estimated 900 different projects involving USAID, with no disclosure of the fine details in the Clinton Foundation filings of any flows back and forth. Why didn't they get upset about that? Why didn't they get upset about the fact that Hillary Clinton kept all of the information created or received on her private servers, the Chappaqua Mrs. Bill?
How does Dersh not even think that's a problem? I mean,
well, you know, there's
destruction of evidence.
It's simple, Jason. I mean, you know, if you're a Clinton, you walk through a wormhole, and you have immunity from everything.
The Obama gate?
Exactly. The Obama-Clinton gate. And you can do whatever you want, because that's how it works. And I don't think that's a lesson that we want to let stand. So anyway, this Linux firing is quite significant. In addition, for fun, Trump tweeted out the movie Independence Day recut to have pictures of himself as the president, interspersed with various and sundry pundits.
I don't think Trump did that. Somebody else made that.
He tweeted it out.
Yeah.
No, I think he might have had a hand in it.
No. Somebody used lip sync software to just take pictures of it. I'm sure he's not doing that.
I don't know. It was pretty funny.
It was well done. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a big development. Then this coming week, I mean, we only have 4 or 5 days until the beginning of Memorial Day weekend, depending on how you count it. A lot of people will start Memorial Day weekend early.
Charles, he's selling masks and gloves on the street.
For $20.
Whoa. For 5? That's a ripoff. No, that's a ripoff.
That's called price gouging.
Oh, boy. And here's more ambulances doing nothing.
Yeah, so now we're getting into the more prime upper west side area.
It's quieter.
Much quieter.
And no radio interference. I wonder if they're subjecting people in Harlem to more electromagnetic frequencies.
So, jumping around a little bit, we're going to get back to doing real slides and having evidence for people to share. But in the last 2+ months, one of the things I've been doing is going back through all these books. And I saved this up for you, Jason. Remember how we talked about the possibility that the movement in property and land that was seen in the values during 2001, it's really odd because they signed a lease.
You talking about in Whitewater?
No, in the Clinton Foundation. They signed a lease March 1st or thereabouts 2002 to take the 27 acres in Little Rock. But during 2001, between December 31st, 2000, December 31st, 2001, the value shown as land went up by $1 million, meaning they spent $1 million on land. So how could you do that? There's nothing to buy in Little Rock. The suspicion was, and some people in Crowdsource the Truth found the property deeds and sent them to me, sent them to us. The suspicion was that that property was likely the property that had been We got hit with our sound problem again. I don't know. It's interesting to see when it pops up. Give me a second. We'll bring it back. So this land, the suspicion was that it was land that had been in the Clinton family in Hot Springs, Arkansas, by the lake.
Right. You
So
spoke
lo
about
and
that.
behold, on page 33
Really?
of Bill Clinton's My Life, there's a paragraph that says, when my Uncle Raymond died, his kids didn't want to sell the land. And fortunately, my foundation and my library had enough money that we purchased the land.
Wow.
And now we have a place. This is Bill Clinton talking in his book.
And
now
when you saw it on page 33, Charles, didn't you say,
immediately-
wait a minute, that's...
Well, I immediately said, I got to bring this up with Jason.
But don't you think that could be Bill Clinton sending a message to someone who sees it on page 33 and understands what it is?
Maybe. But I mean, it goes on to say, what? Victoria's Secret. Yeah. He goes on to say that not only did his foundation buy it as a retreat, which it had no authority to a retreat
Right, that sounds
in Hot Springs,
recreational.
but then it says, so my cousins can continue to use it. I mean,
It's an
ridiculous.
monument, isn't it?
That's called enormement.
Enormous, right.
Yeah, and I believe it's possible that Bill Clinton even may have had a financial interest in that property as well. So this is one we got to jump on. The other thing that's interesting, where before I had suspicions about Whitewater and didn't think much about the idea that the town where the Whitewater property is called Flippin in Marion County wasn't anything to focus on. Lo and behold, when you go into this book, it talks about how when Bill was considering running for Congress in 1974, he went out to this Marion County, to the town of Flippin. And it talks about this, I think it's a perfect scene for the movie. That's just me talking. You'll be a better judge of this. How he and these two people in Marion County go and drive 10 miles outside town in a county that has the fewest number of paved roads in Arkansas. He says that he was in a pickup truck covered with dust when they stop the truck, and these two guys, big thugs he's with, say, all right, Bill. Yeah, they take out a can of red, whatever it is, chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
Red Man.
Uh-huh.
And one guy puts one big gob in his mouth, and the other guy puts another big gob, and they say to him, all right, Bill, you got a simple choice. Let's see you chew tobacco, or you can get out now, and we'll see how long it takes you to walk 10 miles back on unpaved road, twisty-turny
No
roads,
cars around and
and all that kind of stuff.
Why do they want him to chew tobacco? That's a
To
weird
see if he's a
story.
real man. No, people in rural America, people do like.
Okay.
Anyway, but so this is Bill relating the story in his book, for which he was paid over 10 million bucks. I think over much more than 10 million bucks in an advance, and he's describing this seminal incident that galvanized his initial but losing campaign in 1974. And he describes this Marion County, where the Whitewater place is very few paved roads, right? So he knew it was rural, no paved roads. Then he goes back into the Attorney General campaign, and basically, what do you think the total cost of the first, how much of a note did Bill Clinton co-sign for in 1974 when he ran for Congress? 10,000 bucks.
So what does that mean?
But he lost, at the time he lost, he claims he had $40,000 in unpaid campaign debts. How does a guy like that
Come up with 10,000.
Well, later come up with 10,000 or 11,000 in the first McDougal deal before Whitewater in '77. He wasn't making any money. And the more important point is, how cheap is it to buy the Attorney General, right? I mean, if the total campaign is going to cost, let's say, 100,000 max, and the Attorney General has the ability to choose to prosecute Tyson Foods or not, to choose to prosecute Walmart or not,
Right.
or International Paper or Stevens or whatever, it's damn cheap.
We also shouldn't forget that the McDougal guy died at age 57 in prison of a heart attack, and there are ear witnesses who heard him screaming for hours for his heart medication, which they failed to give him, and then he died.
Right.
So basically, they killed him.
Right, so this whole period, this early period of Bill going from law school in 73 to running for Congress the next year or thereabouts to what?
This is a famous place.
Oh, sure, Zabar's. I've had dinner with Eli.
So there's a wine out here as well.
Yeah. Anyway, this whole period needs to be gone over a lot more carefully, and I think what really was going on here is these shady land development schemes. It was much more than Whitewater. It was a perfect vehicle to allege that what you were doing is land development, when in reality what you were doing is you were trying to funnel money to political campaigns, and nobody would check anything because nobody's going to go into those unpaved roads and see.
That there's nothing there.
And in the ways they were doing it, they were selling many lots, not recording the deeds, but by purchase contracts where you don't have to record a deed. And what that means is you could sell the same parcel over and over again.
Which they did.
Which they did, exactly. And it wasn't just Whitewater. There were 15 different developments around Whitewater, including Whitewater. So the whole story, I think, as you say, the limited hangout concept, the teams that had looked at Whitewater did.
Oh, look at this.
What?
People get annoyed when they interrupt you, but we see funny things. Whatever you make it a bat. Soup.
Wuhan bat.
Yeah, make the soup. So Whitewater, sorry, Charles.
So the way the Clintons like to do things, there's so many scandals, they want you to focus just on a piece of the scandal.
Right.
Focus
That's the limited hangout.
Focus on the diseased tissue on the left hand. Don't focus on the whole body and the whole city.
Right.
And so this tactic of using a supposed company or venture as a way of maybe purchasing influence with a rising politician, it hasn't been studied properly. The second issue is that when most people buy property, what they immediately try to do is get a long-term, if they're borrowing, a long-term debt against it. It's the Apthorpe.
What is this?
It's a very fancy building, the Apthorpe. Beautiful architecture. So what you try to do, if you're going to get a loan to buy a property, is if it's a house, you might want to get a 30-year loan if you're young. If it's land, you probably
Sound problem again. Well, I was hopeful that the software update had addressed that, but it seems like no. It smells like sauerkraut or something.
Yeah.
You smell that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So 5-year loan on land. Why? Because you'll know in 5 years if you can develop it or not or something?
Well, no, it's just, it's very difficult to get a 30-year loan on land. Why would you need to take out a 30-year loan? Typically what you want to do is improve the land and turn it into a home, in which case you get a mortgage against the home and the land, right? So most people would not extend a 5-year land loan. And particular in the county like Marion at the time, where there was the county with the fewest miles of paved roads, right? So it was highly undeveloped. And instead of getting a long-term loan, what Bill and the McDougalls got was a demand note. Now, a demand note is like a sword of Excalibur hanging over your head.
I thought that's the sword of Damocles.
Damocles, right?
Yeah.
Well done.
Excalibur is stuck in a rock.
That's right. Good catch. I stand corrected.
Well,
Ooh,
not a big deal. Oh, that guy's got to make a face. Whatever.
Yeah. So, what that means is this tiny little bank had the ability at any moment in time to call the Attorney General and say, all right, pay up the entire loan. $180,000. Come up with it now, even though you haven't sold off the notes. And in this time, the lots, in this time frame, between the time they closed on August 2nd, 1978, and the time they regularized another demand loan, September 30th, 1979, interest rates had moved way up, way up. So ordinarily, a normal human being would have gotten a call early on from these tiny little banks that were lending money, saying, look, pay the entire loan off immediately. But that didn't happen. Waivers
There we go.
that rise, that in terms of value, likely, if you did all the math properly, remember interest rates, the prime rate went above 20% from, call it 10 or 11 when they started the deal. So, I mean, the value of not being told to pay off your demand note, continuing maybe to pay 10% interest, is a value certainly exceeding $25,000. And under the recent Arkansas statute that I saw about public corruption said that a gratuity of $25,000 or more is an Arkansas felony. So I think people have not been looking at this properly. For a modest amount of money relative to their wealth, insiders in Arkansas purchased a Bill Clinton, a Hillary Clinton, and then a governor, Bill, and assistant Hillary, and had them under their thumb, literally under their thumbs. And then they supposedly, Hillary claims in her book that they got out, they finished the Whitewater venture they sold the last lot supposedly in 1985. But for some reason, they kept the scheme going until December of 1992, which makes no sense. You had a money-losing venture.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Well, I think what they were really doing here is not flipping lots using deeds. They were flipping lots using installment sales contract over and over and over again, and not recording the income from those transactions and paying state and federal income taxes on any of that. Which brings me to Vince Foster. So when you go through Hillary's book, when you go through multiple other books,
It keeps doing this. It seems much more frequent now than before, so that's interesting.
You?
78, 65.
Which college?
Fellow Yaley. Okay, we're back with the sound insurance.
So in these multiple books, it talks about how Hillary Clinton basically was not the vice president, but she was, particularly in the transition, running the transition, though Warren Christopher and Vernon Jordan technically co-chaired the transition. Hillary is said to have been running the transition not from DC where the offices were, but from Little Rock. And she had put on her staff 3 key people who were in charge of multiple damage control efforts, but particularly those related to Madison and Whitewater. And those 3 people were, number 1, Loretta Lynch, number 2,
Cheryl Mills?
no, number 2, Vince Foster, and number 3, name will come to, I think it's Bill Kennedy. But these folks, and Foster in particular, was given the responsibility as deputy White House counsel. He was the chief interface with the Justice in the early period before there was a Janet Reno. In that early period, temporarily, Webster Hubbell was the acting deputy attorney general in the Justice Department, and the person like Rod Rosenstein or his replacement, Rosen, who really runs the Justice Department. So they had a big job to do by April 15th, 1993, while Foster was still alive. And that was to file the first couple's tax return for 1992, which someone signed April 15th, 1993. That tax return alleged that they had sold the Whitewater interests, which had, they claimed, a basis, a cost of zero, exactly zero, and they sold it, they claimed, for $1,000. But where's the documentation for any of that? To do that properly, you would have to go back to the very creation of the Whitewater Development Company on, I think it was June 18th, 1979. And you would have to show year by year what was in, what did you buy on August 2nd, 1978? What did you sell prior to June 18th, 1979? What did you sell between then and September 30th, 1979? What loan applications did you make out under oath to get the monies to keep those demand loans going? What did you represent to the lenders about, you know, the nature of the collateral, the disposition of any proceeds? What did you report after you created the company by way of state income tax and federal income tax?
Is she talking to us?
No. And to do all that properly would have been, by the admission of Hillary Clinton and others, a complete mess, because the records, the full complete records had gone missing. So you look at this and you say, all right, here's a long-standing pattern and practice. 1978, watch it. 1978 to 1992, 15 years, operating a Whitewater Development Corporation without doing the paperwork properly, without doing the finances properly, without doing the tax returns properly, possibly using it as a scheme to arrange for cash that was untaxed to go into your pocket for your personal lifestyle, to finance political campaigns. What?
Well, I just noticed that this place is saying security jobs are available. They've taken over this bagel place.
That's Epic Security.
Yeah, I've seen those Epic security guards walking around Times Square and stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were telling
Yeah,
us
so-
about all this different stuff. But what about the statute of limitations on any of that?
Well, no. Again, there's no statute of limitations on a conspiracy, a RICO conspiracy. So we're looking at the elements. We're looking at saying, does the team of co-conspirators, the Bruce Lindsays, the Bill Clintons,
Yeah.
the Hillary Clintons, the various and sundry other people, keep going that way, who are around this, do they ever have in their past, prior to creating the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, October 23, 1997, do they have a pattern in practicing of running riot over applicable laws dealing with the reporting and financing of corporations? And I think they do.
Yeah.
And in particular, the Whitewater one is troubling, I would argue, for them, in that Hillary herself claims the goal of the Whitewater Development Company was, she claims, to market the lots to wealthy retirees. Now, I don't, no disrespect meant to the people of Marion County.
That's not where wealthy retirees are hanging out.
Most of them don't. I'm sure I
Well,
like
it's not
rural
like
America.
they're offering that in Miami or somewhere where it's known that people with money go to retire.
Instead, what they were really doing is they were, on purpose, it was like predatory lending. They were
Right.
marketing it to
It's not
people
Palm Springs.
elsewhere. It says they were marketing it to people who were lower income people, and they were doing it with this method of purchase contracts, because purchase contracts transactions which are not recorded do not require a credit check. Right? That's much more plausible than what they were doing is trying to rip off unsophisticated people.
And you've got to be very sophisticated like you are to even understand what's going on. Most people, even when you explain it, are not going to know what you just said.
Well, but it's, to me, they use the Whitewater scheme, they use the Tyson commodity trade deal, they use their connections to Stevens and other big companies to basically, for a modest amount of money, put a governor, first attorney general, then a governor, and ultimately a president into power who would be so busy playing hey diddle diddle with the interns that he couldn't be bothered to actually care about the important stuff. That, I think, is the arc of Bill Clinton's history.
Well, and you know what? On Friday, on David Hawkins' Discovery CSI, David went back to Bill Clinton's days at Oxford and suggested that, some of these universities are perhaps used as like I don't know what you would call it, like aggregators for the intelligence agencies, where young, impressionable future leaders are all there. The smartest people are at Oxford, Harvard, Yale, wherever, and that perhaps there is an effort to identify people who are, someone who fits a certain qualification. They've got a certain amount of charisma, intelligence, but yet they're willing to do immoral or illegal things, and you compromise that person early.
Right, and you got them for life.
And you've got them for life.
Yeah, I think as a guess, I mean, I'm not involved in government, never have been, never want to be, but as a guess, our intelligence agencies and other intelligence agencies developed long ago, before there were computers and AI and all that stuff, a profile of the type of person who would be best used for something like this. Typically somebody with a troubled childhood, who doesn't have a lot of money, doesn't have authority figures he or she can rely upon, or was willing to rely upon, is very ambitious, is financially unsophisticated,
Right.
and may have a skirt or a pants problem.
Well,
or
some
both.
sort of problem that they can exploit. Drugs,
Right.
sexual something.
Gambling, you name it.
Right.
And so, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. And then when you look at the number of, quote, Rhodes scholars
Yeah.
around Clinton, around Washington, D.C., and
good.
I mean, how could, to pick on Susan Rice for a second, what is this?
This is an Apple store, but it's
Yeah.
another example of just a huge amount of retail space that's not used. Retail stores are closed until further notice. I mean, Apple can stand to lose billions of dollars without blinking an eye, but what happens to all these stores that have, now 2-3 months rent to pay
All lives are
with no
important.
revenue?
Jason. All lives are important. We should shut the country down because people could drive and have a traffic accident, and you shouldn't, all lives are important. That's why we got to stop doing everything.
Yeah. Well, what'd you think about Dershowitz saying that if you don't want to abide by the law as uttered by Anthony Fauci, you can rot in your house and never interact with humans again?
Or leave the country.
Right.
Yeah,
That was so pretentious of him to say. Charles, for most people, myself included, even moving within this city would be a financial burden that I'm just not ready to take on and probably couldn't do. The concept that you could just lift up and move to another country, what is he talking about? Most people can't do that.
It's silliness.
It was stupid.
I mean, it's going back to our opening discussion. I mean, it's not as if we have here a proven raging contagion. We don't have that.
Right.
It's not as if we have a proven solution, whether it be a treatment, vaccine, or otherwise. It's not as if this challenge is the greatest medical challenge in history, or even the greatest medical challenge of 2020. It's a challenge, but it's not as big as heart disease, cancer, etc. And we're not saying to people, before we said to Jason Goodman, you got to take this vaccine or you can't leave the apartment, I think you'd say to that idiot who tried to yell at us in the mask, why don't you try having one meal every other day for a little while?
Well, or lift up a barbell or something. Eat whatever you want, just stay in shape.
Well, he's clearly not doing that. So now where we are is right near Lincoln Center for people who don't know.
Yeah, this is cool.
And this, it's quite beautiful.
Yep. I wonder how places like this will, this is where the some film festival, New York Film something or other happens. Well, how are they going to have film festivals? How are they going to have concerts, movie theaters? That business is going to go under. I've been sending you some of the articles that I still get from Variety about, what the different movie theater companies, AMC, we've walked by a few of them. That one over there is like the flagship AMC Imax theater in the city.
Uh-huh.
It's a huge amount of real estate for them to rent or own or whatever. But it just seems like having a movie theater in there is not going to be able to earn a sufficient amount of money to justify utilizing that much space for a movie theater. Why wouldn't they turn it into a shopping center or, apartments? But there's going to be reduced demand for living in this city, I think. This is going to change a lot of things, Charles.
Right, there was an article saying that in the West Village and the Upper East Side, an estimated 40% of the residents have left, principally to their second homes or moved out of the city.
Wow.
Because they see the handwriting on the wall. I mean, the debt that is going to be created here, the call for taxes on the rich. Maybe we keep going. Is only going to get louder.
Right. And now here is actual Lincoln Center. Ooh, it's totally closed. I mean, I guess that's no surprise, but I haven't seen that before.
Why do you think they have the fountain going, but the thing is closed?
It's an excellent question. Why would they? I've seen like an opera here or something.
It probably wasn't a burlesque show. Probably an opera or a concert.
Yeah, no, it was an opera. I'm not that sophisticated when it comes to operas.
Yeah, I'm not into opera.
I might have slept, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure.
Did you snore?
I don't know. I was asleep at the time. I don't think I snore.
There's PJ Clark's that's moved there recently, I guess.
Well, that used to be the Iridium Room, which was a jazz club, your favorite thing.
Yeah, all that jazz.
Charles, you and I have done some really amazing walking. This is more, I don't know if people realize how much walking we've done.
Yeah, I think we'll finish up at Columbus Circle, maybe?
Sure.
Just not too far away. PJ Clark's may have been established in 1884, but certainly not here.
I think Chicago.
Was it in Chicago?
I think so. I mean, I've seen them in Chicago. Additional PJ Clark restaurants. So perhaps.
One wonders how expensive steaks will be when restaurants ultimately do open up.
Well, you also spoke about Tyson Foods in the context of their various interactions with the Clintons. There was Tyson Foods just in the news right now. I mean, they're talking about how the food processing factories are having their own challenges with employees not wanting to come in and falling ill and things like that. And we've also heard about farmers having too many animals, so they have to kill the animals.
Yeah, well,